There's a creature in Star Wars so massive that a Rancor, the thing that almost killed Luke Skywalker in Return of the Jedi, is the size of its hands. And most biggest Star Wars creatures videos completely forget it exists. I've watched a lot of those videos. You probably have too. They cover the Sarlacc, the Krayt Dragon, those space whales from Rebels. And look, those are all fine pics. But scroll down to the comments on any of them, and you'll find the same frustrated responses over and over again. What about the Gorog? Did you even play Force Unleashed? Why does nobody ever talk about the games? Here's the thing. The movies showed you the tourist-friendly monsters, the stuff that could fit a PG-13 rating and a 3-minute action sequence. But the games? The games showed you the nightmare fuel that would have gotten cut from family entertainment before the first draft hit a producer's desk. So let's fix that gap. 3 creatures the theatrical releases couldn't show you. Starting with the beast that Star Wars The Force Unleashed 2 threw at players in October 2010, and that nobody making Biggest Creatures content seems to remember exists. The Gorog. But first, we need to establish what we're measuring against. When Luke Skywalker dropped through that trapdoor in Jabba's palace back in 1983, audiences got their first real look at what a large predator looks like in this galaxy. The Rancor became the template. The default image that pops into your head when someone says, giant Star Wars monster. And for good reason. That thing was terrifying. 5 meters tall, roughly 16 feet, or about 3 times the height of an adult human. The creature weighed 1,650 kilograms, basically a small car with claws and an attitude problem. Its teeth were the length of combat knives. Not pocket knives, combat knives. The kind you'd carry into actual warfare. And its hide could deflect standard blaster fire, which meant the stormtroopers standing around Jabba's throne room couldn't have killed it even if they'd wanted to. Luke didn't fight the Rancor. He couldn't. Even with the Force on his side, direct confrontation wasn't an option. Instead, he killed it by triggering a security gate mechanism. A heavy Durasteel barrier came down on the creature's skull, crushing it fatally. Environmental exploitation. The only realistic option against something that size with that kind of natural armor. That scene did something important for the franchise. It established scale. It gave audiences a reference point. From that moment forward, Rancor-sized became a meaningful descriptor. 5 meters of muscle and teeth in a pit designed to kill prisoners for entertainment. That's what dangerous looks like in Star Wars. The creature's keeper wept when it died. Most people forget that detail. The Rancor came from Dathomir originally, a species capable of forming emotional bonds with handlers, a semi-sentient being with actual feelings. Not the mindless monster the gladiatorial presentation suggested. There's something almost tragic about that. The Rancor never asked to be there. It was just an animal in a cage, doing what animals do. Keep that image in your mind. 5 meters, 16 feet. A creature so dangerous that the hero of the original trilogy couldn't face it in direct combat, even with supernatural abilities at his disposal. Now multiply it by 5. The Gorog stands 80 feet tall. 25 meters of hunched, bipedal nightmare fuel that reduces the Rancor to footnote status. Its body stretches 100 feet from head to tail, 30 meters, roughly the same length as a blue whale. Except blue whales are horizontal. They float. They're designed for buoyancy in ocean environments. This thing stands upright on 2 legs and moves through space that wasn't built for it. If you place the Statue of Liberty's copper figure next to a Gorog, just the statue, not the pedestal, the creature would reach roughly halfway up. Lady Liberty's copper form measures 46 meters from heel to torch crown. The Gorog clears 25 meters standing in its hunched posture. Not extended, not reaching, just existing in its natural stance. The Rancor that terrorized Luke Skywalker? It would fit in the Gorog's hands. Both of them, at the same time. If you played Force Unleashed back in 2008, you remember this thing. Actually, that's not quite right. The Gorog appeared in the sequel. Star Wars, The Force Unleashed 2, released in October 2010 for PlayStation 3, Xbox 360, Wii, and Windows. But if you were part of that era of Star Wars gaming, if you spent hours pulling Star Destroyers out of the sky with the Force and wondering how the developers could possibly top that, then the Gorog represents the answer to a question the first game raised. What do you throw at a character who can bring down capital ships? You throw something that makes capital ships look reasonable by comparison. The Force Unleashed 2 put you in control of Starkiller, a clone of Darth Vader's original secret apprentice. The first game had established Starkiller as arguably the most powerful Force user in Legends continuity, someone who could ragdoll ATS, tear apart Imperial facilities, and yes, telekinetically grab a Star Destroyer and crash it into a planet's surface. The sequel needed threats that could challenge that power level. They found one on Cato Nemoidia. Baron Marillion Tarko operated an entertainment complex there called the Tarko-Se Arena. Gladiatorial combat for wealthy audiences. The kind of people who had enough credits to travel to a Trade Federation colony world and enough moral flexibility to enjoy watching things die for sport. Tarko catered to that clientele with increasingly spectacular attractions. Bigger creatures, more elaborate death traps, higher stakes. And at the center of his operation, chained up like the galaxy's worst circus attraction, was the Gorog. Let me describe this thing properly. The statistics don't capture what actually makes it disturbing. The lower half is wrong. There's no other way to say it. The Gorog's legs are almost skeletal, gray, leathery skin stretched directly over visible bone structure, with gaps and apertures where you'd expect muscle tissue to fill the space. They look like they shouldn't be able to support the creature's mass. They look like something that died but kept moving anyway, animated by something other than normal biological function. Every frame of the creature moving creates a subtle cognitive dissonance, because your brain knows legs aren't supposed to work that way. But the upper torso? That's where all the mass went. Overdeveloped musculature, shoulders and chest and arms, built like the creature was designed specifically for destruction. Development materials describe the forearms as being thick as a small cruiser. Not hyperbole, just the scale the artists were working at. Those forearms terminate in hands that might be the most unsettling part of the whole creature. They look almost human. 5 digits, opposable thumbs, proportioned like your hands, just scaled up to a size where each finger is longer than you are tall. There's something deeply uncomfortable about seeing human hand structure on something that massive and that hostile. It triggers a recognition response that makes the creature feel less like an alien animal and more like something that understands what it's doing. 4 bone tusks extend from the lower jaw. Each one exceeds the length of a full-grown human body. They're positioned like mandibles, framing a mouth that could fit a speeder inside with room to spare. And covering the creature's skull is a metal plate, surgical intervention of some kind, apparently addressing what appeared to be severe cranial damage. Something had hurt this creature badly enough to expose brain tissue, and something had deemed it worth keeping alive afterward. The game doesn't explain what caused that damage. It doesn't explain who performed the surgery or why. But the implication is clear. The Gorog that players encounter isn't the creature in its natural state. It's been modified, preserved, kept functional despite injuries that should have been fatal. Baron Tarko wanted his centerpiece attraction alive, and he was willing to intervene surgically to ensure it stayed that way. The creature has 2 hearts, 2 separate cardiac organs, positioned in different regions of its massive torso. That detail becomes structurally important during the boss encounter, but it also raises questions about the Gorog's evolutionary history. What kind of predator needs redundant cardiac systems? What did this species face in its natural environment that made backup hearts an evolutionary advantage? Something on whatever world spawned the Gorog was dangerous enough that even apex predators needed fail-safe biology. The Gorog possessed a large cranial cavity, but minimal neural capacity relative to its skull size. Whether that represents natural development or the result of whatever modifications the cranial plate conceals remains unclear. But the practical result is a creature that operates on instinct and aggression rather than strategy. It doesn't outsmart prey. It overwhelms them through sheer physical superiority. The Tarkosay arena had been constructed specifically around the Gorog as its centerpiece, not retrofitted, built for purpose. Baron Tarko's architects designed containment infrastructure at scale, restraints, enclosures, arena spaces that dwarfed typical construction, because there was no other way to house something this size. The arena wasn't a building with a creature in it. It was a creature containment facility with seating attached. When the Gorog breaks free during the game's Cato Nemoidia sequence, you get to see what happens when that containment fails. Support pillars the diameter of mature trees get displaced by casual contact. The creature doesn't even aim for them. It's moving through space, and the pillars happen to be there, and then they're not anymore. Reinforced walls built specifically for creature containment, walls designed with this exact scenario in mind, just fail under direct impact. The engineers who built them probably thought they'd planned for every contingency. They were wrong. The thing doesn't notice. It's responding to threats on a scale where your infrastructure is basically furniture. And then you have to fight it. The boss encounter unfolds across multiple phases, and every single one of them forces you to internalize the scale differential between your character and the thing trying to kill you. The Gorog isn't just big. It's big enough that the game had to develop specific camera systems that could pull back far enough to frame the creature while still keeping your character visible and controllable. Direct assault doesn't work. This is important. Starkiller can pull Star Destroyers out of orbit. He can generate force lightning powerful enough to arc across multiple targets. He's arguably one of the most offensively powerful force users in Legends continuity. And he cannot simply brute force the Gorog. The creature's hide is too dense. Its mass is too great. Force pushes that would send stormtroopers flying like leaves barely register. Lightsaber strikes that cut through Durasteel don't penetrate meaningfully. You're not fighting something you can overpower. You're fighting something you have to outsmart. The Gorog's offensive capabilities are calibrated to its scale. Ground impact attacks generate shockwaves that cover entire arena sections. You dodge these based on visual tells and pattern recognition, because getting hit means death, or near death. The creature tears structural elements out of walls and throws them, because at its size, architecture becomes ammunition. Grasping attacks can catch Starkiller directly, requiring frantic input sequences to escape before the Gorog crushes or throws you. And throughout all of this, the audio design does something specific. Sustained low-frequency output, tuned to communicate physical threat through your speakers or headphones. The Gorog's vocalizations hit frequencies designed to create visceral discomfort. You don't just see this thing attacking, you feel it. The sound design team understood that scale needed to translate across sensory channels, not just visual ones. The defeat method is what separates this from a standard boss fight. You have to destroy both hearts, not damage the weak points until the health bar depletes, not hit it enough times in the glowing spots. You have to actually get inside the creature while it's trying to kill you, navigate its body, find the first heart, destroy it with your lightsaber, survive the creature's increasingly frantic attempts to dislodge you, find the second heart, destroy that too, and get out before the whole system collapses. Starkiller accomplishes this because of his specific power set. Force abilities let him anchor himself against surfaces while the Gorog thrashes. His lightsaber provides a weapon that can actually damage internal organs. His supernatural resilience lets him survive the biological environment inside a living creature. Temperatures, acids, pressures that would kill an unaugmented human. Consider what makes Starkiller different from other Force users who might face this creature. Darth Vader couldn't do what Starkiller does here, not because Vader lacks power. In raw Force potential, Vader might exceed his former apprentice, but because Vader's cybernetic suit creates vulnerabilities. The life support systems, the prosthetic limbs, the sealed armor that keeps him breathing. Immersion in a biological environment, exposure to internal fluids and digestive acids, the physical stress of being thrashed around inside a creature's torso. Vader's equipment would fail. His mobility limitations would prevent the agile navigation the encounter requires. Starkiller succeeds because he combines overwhelming force power with an intact human body. No mechanical dependencies, no life support to malfunction. Just raw, supernatural ability channeled through flesh and bone. The game presents this as barely possible. The most powerful Force user in the narrative, at the peak of his abilities, driven by desperate motivation, and he survives the Gorog fight by the narrowest of margins. The encounter is designed to feel like you shouldn't be winning, like the creature is too much, like you're only alive because of factors that don't apply to normal people. Which brings us to the question everyone asks. Could you actually kill one of these things? Standard infantry weapons would not work. Blaster rifles, blaster carbines, the stuff Imperial stormtroopers carry into combat. You might as well throw rocks. The Gorog's hide demonstrated resistance to damage that exceeded what personal weapons could meaningfully address. Even concentrated fire from a full platoon wouldn't penetrate to vital organs. You'd just make it angry. Vehicle-mounted weapons get more interesting. An AT-AT's heavy laser cannons represent serious firepower, designed to crack fortified positions and destroy rebel infrastructure. Against a Gorog, those might actually deal damage. The problem is targeting. The Gorog moves faster than you'd expect for its size. 80 feet of creature covering ground at speeds that confuse your sense of scale. And AT-ATs aren't exactly nimble weapons platforms. They're designed for slow, methodical advances, not tracking agile targets. The weapon systems that could hurt the Gorog are attached to platforms that can't aim fast enough to hit it reliably. Starfighter strafing runs might work better. TIE fighter laser cannons lack the punch of heavy vehicle weapons, but the platforms can actually maneuver. A coordinated squadron making repeated passes could potentially wear a Gorog down over time, assuming the pilots could maintain enough distance to avoid the creature's reach while still landing accurate shots. But here's the question that got specific engagement when people discuss this online. What about orbital bombardment? What about a Star Destroyer parking overhead and turning the entire area into glass? Yeah, that would work. A sustained turbolaser barrage from orbit would kill a Gorog. Those weapons are designed to crack planetary shields, to reduce surface installations to slag, to end sieges through overwhelming firepower. The Gorog is tough, but it's not survive concentrated planetary bombardment tough. Nothing biological is. The problem isn't whether you could kill it. The problem is whether you could kill it without losing everything else in the process. Orbital bombardment doesn't discriminate. A turbolaser strike powerful enough to guarantee a Gorog kill would devastate everything within several kilometers. If your Gorog is rampaging through a populated area, say an entertainment complex full of wealthy spectators, then call the fleet isn't a solution that preserves anything worth saving. You'd be trading one disaster for a larger, more controllable one. The practical reality is that a Gorog in a populated area requires either a Force user at Starkiller's power level or a willingness to write off significant collateral damage. Neither option is readily available to most Star Wars military forces, which might explain why Baron Tarko felt comfortable keeping one chained up in his arena. He knew that if it ever broke free, nobody could stop it without destroying his facility anyway. Now, for everyone who watches The Mandalorian, if I skipped this next one, you'd riot, and you'd be right to. The Mythosaur. You've seen it 1,000 times without realizing what you were looking at. That skull symbol on Boba Fett's armor in the original trilogy. The insignia on every Mandalorian helmet, shoulder pauldron, and clan banner throughout the franchise. The tusked skull silhouette that represents an entire warrior culture. That's not decorative. That's a creature. And for decades, everyone assumed it was extinct. Within Mandalorian cultural tradition, the Mythosaur represents the foundational test of warrior capability. According to oral histories maintained across Mandalorian clans, these creatures once dominated the planet Mandalore, existing as apex predators of such scale and ferocity that no individual could confront one and survive. The founding mythology credits a figure known as Mandalore I with accomplishing the supposedly impossible, taming mythosaurs through individual combat prowess, riding them into battle, and establishing the martial traditions that would define the Mandalorian people across subsequent millennia. The skull on the armor? That's a reminder. Every Mandalorian warrior carries the image of the thing their ancestors conquered. It's like if every human military decorated their uniforms with mammoth tusks, except the mammoth in question could have eaten a Rancor for breakfast. Historical accounts placed mythosaurs in the ancient past of Mandalore, their extinction occurring so long ago that even Mandalorians themselves treated them as legendary rather than biological. The Imperial bombardment that devastated Mandalore during the Great Purge was believed to have eliminated any possibility of surviving populations. The planet's surface was considered uninhabitable, its waters toxic, its ecosystems destroyed. Then, The Mandalorian Season 3, Episode 2 aired on Disney Plus in March 2023. The Mines of Mandalore. Bo-Katan Kryze submerged herself in the living waters beneath Mandalore's surface, a sacred site central to Mandalorian religious practice. And something passed beneath her, something massive. The distinctive tusked skull shape that defines the Mandalorian cultural symbol was visible in profile. The visual composition positioned Bo-Katan as diminutive against the creature's mass, suggesting dimensions competitive with or exceeding the Gorog specifications. The creature didn't attack. It passed through the frame without aggressive behavior, almost like it recognized something. This is the thing about mythosaurs that makes them different from the Gorog. The Gorog is pure threat, mindless aggression, something that attacks because attacking is what it does. But mythosaurs were tamed. The founding mythology of an entire warrior culture depends on the premise that these creatures could be ridden into battle. How did ancient Mandalorians accomplish that? The methodology remains undocumented in canonical sources. The founding mythology credits individual combat, but this may represent legendary exaggeration over millennia of retelling. Mandalorian personal weaponry, designed for combat against humanoid opponents, would prove inadequate against a creature of this scale. The implication is that mythosaur taming, if it occurred at all, involved coordinated group efforts, environmental advantages, or technologies no longer available to contemporary Mandalorians. Could you kill one? Maybe. The creature's survival in environments that destroyed surface life suggests biological resilience that would complicate conventional approaches. But mythosaurs aren't armored the way Gorogs are. They're built for aquatic or semi-aquatic existence. Heavy weapons might work. Sustained fire might work. The question isn't really capability, it's whether killing one would matter. Mythosaurs aren't threats in the Gorog sense. They're cultural touchstones. Killing one might be technically possible, but would represent something closer to sacrilege than victory. The people wearing that skull symbol aren't memorializing prey. They're honoring something that made them who they are. Finally, for everyone who played Jedi Fallen Order in November 2019, the Binog. Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order released for PlayStation 4, Xbox One, and Windows, developed by Respawn Entertainment. The game followed Cal Kestis, a former Jedi Padawan who survived Order 66 and spent 5 years hiding his Force sensitivity while working as a scrapper on the planet Bracca. The opening sequences on Bracca's industrial shipbreaking facilities included something that established stakes before the protagonist had access to meaningful combat capabilities. Cal possessed neither the weaponry nor the developed Force abilities that would later define his character. The Binog encounter occurred specifically during the period when the protagonist was most vulnerable. The creature emerged from the polluted industrial waterways that flowed through the shipbreaking facilities. Its physical specifications placed it at a scale significantly exceeding the Rancor baseline, though smaller than the Gorog. The Binog featured an elongated body structure with semi-aquatic adaptations. Its head included multiple optical organs and a mouth aperture capable of accommodating small vehicles. The creature's epidermis showed extensive scarring and weathering, either advanced age or repeated exposure to Bracca's hazardous industrial environment. A planet covered in jagged salvage metal and toxic runoff. Unlike the Gorog, which was imprisoned and deliberately weaponized, the Binog appeared to be a native apex predator, occupying its ecological niche. The creature's behavior suggested territorial defense or opportunistic predation rather than directed aggression. It responded to Cal's presence as it presumably would to any potential prey entering its domain. Here's the key thing. You couldn't fight it. The Braca encounter wasn't a boss fight. Cal Kestis couldn't engage the Benog in combat. The encounter was structured entirely around evasion and environmental navigation. Players navigated collapsing platforms, climbed salvage wreckage, and timed movements between the creature's attack patterns without any option for offensive response. The creature's proximity during certain sequence moments provided detailed visual information about its anatomy, individual teeth, the tracking movement of multiple eyes, the textural detail of damaged hide, while controller haptic feedback communicated the physical impact of the creature's movements against the industrial infrastructure. By opening the game with an encounter where combat was impossible, Respawn Entertainment established that Jedi Fallen Order's protagonist would face threats beyond his capabilities. The near-successful killing of Cal Kestis in the game's opening minutes created stakes that subsequent encounters could reference. Players understood that this universe contained creatures their character simply could not fight. The Binog's absence from later gameplay was structurally intentional. Its purpose was establishing threat context, rather than serving as a returning antagonist. Could you kill one? Theoretically, yes. The creature didn't demonstrate the supernatural resilience or armored hide of the Gorog. Imperial AT-AT walkers or coordinated air support would likely prove effective. But that wasn't the point. The Binog existed to teach you something specific. Even Jedi face things they can't overcome through lightsaber combat. 3 creatures, 3 games, 3 different ways of showing you what theatrical Star Wars couldn't. The Gorog, 25 meters of surgically preserved nightmare fuel that required destroying 2 hearts from inside the creature's body to defeat. The Mythosaur, cultural foundation of an entire warrior people, believed extinct until a Disney Plus episode proved otherwise. The Benog, opening minutes proof that even Force-sensitive protagonists face threats beyond direct confrontation. Video games have been hiding nightmare fuel for decades. The theatrical releases gave you Rancors and Sarlaccs because those fit the constraints of family-friendly adventure cinema. But the games operated under different rules, different ratings, different expectations. And here's the thing nobody talks about. The scariest stuff isn't always the biggest. The Gorog terrifies through scale. It overwhelms through sheer physical impossibility. But Star Wars games have creatures that work through different mechanisms, things that fit through doorways, that hunt in packs, that target your psychology rather than your body. The Leviathans get attention because they're spectacular, but the smaller nightmares, those are the ones that stick with you when you turn the game off. Maybe that's a video for another time. Subscribe for more stories like this.